After 2 rounds of total carnage at the Bloodstorm Slaughterfest tournament, we continued with round 3 out of 4 total. And this time I'm facing off against an Empire of Sonnstahl army list. You can see my army list here, and well, description and a bit of discussion is in the first video. So we'll now just go to the army list of my opponent. So this is a Knight Commander on a young Griffin with the Light of Sonnstahl, for which I'm quite scared with my character, but I think if we match up with our generals, then I will still be the top dog. Then there's a Wizard on a Pegasus with the Locket of Senna, so that's quite funny because he changes his stats but still has the Pegasus to kick your character. Then 10 Electoral Cavalry, so with the Knight Commander, if he goes into the unit, they become a parent unit, but presumably he won't put his Knight Commander in the unit because of the mismatching bases. And also he doesn't have any support unit to make use of the parent support system. So then we have 10 State Militia who are irregular, so that means that they skirmish. 4 Knights of the Sun Griffin with Musician Standard and an Ether icon, and 5 Riders with some Brace of Pistols. And at this point level, the 5 Riders are going to be able to dominate the field really. Here's a quick peek of both the armies. So first a shot of my Warriors of the Dark Gods, and then a shot of my opponent's army, and then we go into the game. So if you've seen the previous videos, you can see that the terrain has been reshuffled a bit, and also we are having the diagonal deployment, so the game is totally different, and the table is totally different than the previous rounds we played on it. So once again the Chimera proves to be very convenient for deployment because, well, it's just such an incredibly mobile piece. It's great to just put it down fast. It's just fast cav really, and especially it's also very maneuverable as it's a single model unit. So I don't know where the Riders are gonna come yet, so I decide to deploy my Barbarians on my Warrior Knights such that I have a full view of the flanks. And yeah, considering the fact that I leave a gap now in the middle of my deployment, I actually shouldn't have done this, I think. But well, there were a couple of considerations to make. First off is the Riders. I want to prevent their Vanguard from being very effective. One of the ways of doing that is to angle your units like I did with the Warrior Knights and the Barbarians. The other thing that I want to achieve is that I get a face-off against my Forsworn against his Demigryph Knights, because that is the ultimate counter that I can think of really. And considering the fact that we still have a roll-off in this case for the first turn, I might as well get the first turn so my opponent can't be as aggressive with the Vanguard as he would want to be. Because yeah, if he goes very aggressively, then I will surely catch up with him when I charge into him. So I think I should have deployed probably the Barbarians even a little bit more to the back, because in that way I could have fully prevented the Vanguard of his Riders. But in the way I did it now, there was still some vagueness in where the Forsworn were going to be. So yeah, the deployment was interesting. So at this point my opponent actually makes the Vanguard move, so this is still before we know who's going to start the game. He moves up quite cautiously. The range on the Chimera, the charge range is quite long indeed. And when we make the roll, I actually get to start first. And at this point I'm so focused on getting these Knights of the Sun Griffin that that's the first thing that I move up to. Just totally forgetting that my Chimera can charge. So thankfully my opponent allows me still to charge with the Chimera. Yeah, and that's also a bit in the spirit of the tournament that you allow people still to do stuff like that. In comparison to some tournaments where, but you could argue that at some tournaments such moves would not be allowed. Yeah, so sportsmanship is scores high at Bloodstorm tournaments, or at least the goal of the tournament is mostly to have fun, and it's also reflected in the objectives. So actually, for this battle, my objective is to kill the Knights of the Sun Griffin of my opponent. And at the end of the battle, I discovered that my opponent's goal was to. There's also an objective where you have to lose your own unit, and the unit he nominated for that was the Knights of the Sun Griffin, I believe. So he actually also wanted to get rid of them. Now, I was able to move up so far with my Forsworn that the Knights of the Sun Griffin don't have a charge on the Barbarians, because once they wheel, but basically they come just nearly in contact with my Forsworn unit, so they can't make any angle towards the Barbarians. Yeah, I play a lot of Empire myself, so I went quite confident into this matchup, especially also since my magic, for my magic I could take Hellfire and Breath of Corruption and the Hand of Glory. So the Breath of Corruption is incredibly useful against the Knightly Orders and the Knight Commander, and Hellfire is incredibly useful against his mage and against the State Militia and the Riders. So basically, there's no there's no real spell that he can let through. So that, well, any spell for me is a win for me. My opponent at this point struggles with this Knights of the Sun Griffin, and he tries to solve the situation by moving up his State Militia. Except I can still make the angle to. I can still make the wheel in order to charge the Knights of the Sun Griffin, and I also alerted my opponent of this. But he said, like, yeah, oh well, okay, anyway, I'll just do this, and then we'll see what happens. Yeah, the Knights of the Sun Griffin are a very nice unit. They're a very sturdy unit within the Empire roster compared to the other choices, especially. But they suffer from one thing, and that is, I think units can be evaluated in two types of mobility, and that's either the speed that they have. So Knights of the Sun Griffin have a very good speed. But their actual mobility, in which they can just move around the field, is way more limited because it's such a broad unit and it wheels very tediously, and like stuff like 3 Vampire Knights are very mobile and also very flexible. And State Militia is very flexible, yet it's not very fast. Knights of the Sun Griffin are the other way around. They are very fast. They can be very fast, but they're not necessarily very mobile. I don't know what the webcam is doing right now, going out in a focus all the time. Probably it has some difficulties. So I hope it's still bearable for you as a viewer to watch this. Yeah, so my next turn I managed to charge the Knights of the Sun Griffin, and my Chimera does his Chimera thing where he just marches up all the way 20 inches. And yeah, this is quite annoying for my opponent, because the Knights of this Knightly Orders, they're not very comfortable at taking a charge of the Chimera even. They could reform to face the Chimera, and well, they're just regular knights, so they're not Knightly Orders, which is also why I was quite confident in putting my Chimera where it is now, because he needs 6s to wound me, and I go in with 5 attacks. Even if I kill one knight, it's a win for me, because I believe he has a standard. I'm not sure even. But it's most likely going to be the case that I manage to kill at least one knight every single round, and then it's going to be a draw. And I'm pretty happy to grind out the unit like that. Otherwise, the warrior knights are just staying out of range of his knights, just to give him no options there whatsoever. And the knights cannot get away from the chimera in this way. But the warrior knights do also zone out the riders a little bit, even though the riders can obviously still just go further into my lines. And then for magic, I managed to remove the wizard of my opponent off the table. Yeah, he had to choose between the hellfire on his mage or the breath of corruption on his general, and he went for the hellfire on his mage. Then in combat, the Forsworn, they deal some damage to the Knights of the Sun Griffin, but not even that much really. My lord kind of left his attacks. And then my opponent decided to charge in his state militia in order to save the day. Yeah, I was surprised by that, because I wouldn't guess that the state militia are gonna help in this case. Most likely they give me a better target for my combat. And also any wounds that they do, I most likely bounce them, or even they will result in hits back on the state militia unit. So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say that that was a good plan. You might as well have just shot at my barbarians with the guys. Then we go to the riders. The riders are shooting against my barbarians. They knock off a couple, and then we go to combat. Yeah, so he tries to whittle me down, and my Forsworn take a couple of wounds, but his Knights of the Sun Griffin also take a couple of wounds, even from hitting the Forsworn. The state militia, I don't believe they do any wounds, and I managed to kill a couple of them. The Doomlord this turn actually does some work, and he puts 4 wounds on the Knights of the Sun Griffin. But in general, it's a combat that I'm going to grind them out anyway. Whether it's this turn or the next, it doesn't really matter. So the Knights of the Sun Griffin, they still stick. But in my turn, I can just reform and then face the Knight Commander that's still hiding there to hunt my character. So he decided with his knights to just come forward to get out of the range of the Chimera, and then my warrior knights were ideally positioned to charge his knights, which I was very happy with. Sorry for the coughing. So yeah, the warrior knights on the Knights of the knightly orders, I would expect them to win combat to quite some extent. Not necessarily break the unit on the first round, maybe, but yeah, otherwise probably the second round or after that. And then the barbarians, they just serve as a platform for my caster in this battle. I don't really need them particularly, because the Forsworn and the warrior knights on their own, they already deal enough damage. The Chimera came back because, well, the Knight Commander is probably going to go into my Lord, and I wouldn't want to face the Knight Commander with my Chimera either way. The State Militia I could get rid of by using the Chimera, but I don't think it's necessary, because any inconvenience they will cause, it's gonna. They could go into the Forsworn. I don't really care about that. It means that the Knight Commander just doesn't go in there, so I can still cast magic on him. And the warrior knights, if they are going to harass the warrior knights, then it means that my warrior knights are out of combat, and then they can kill them either way. So I thought that the best use for the Chimera was to set up for a charge against the riders. In the magic phase, I managed to whittle them down a little bit, and yeah, then we go to combat. So the Forsworn managed to clear the Knights of the Sun Griffin. Meanwhile in magic I still managed to get a Breath of Corruption off on his Knight Commander, dealing 2 wounds to the guy. That was lucky. That was a very convenient spell to get through. And the warrior knights, they absolutely blast through the knightly orders. So at this point, the army of my opponent is clearing up. Yeah, I think it's it was a difficult matchup for him to start with, because the only hope of him removing my my Doomlord is with his Knight Commander, but it has to be intact for it to work. Yeah, and then my magic means that either his Knight Commander or his mage is going to get removed off the table. All while rendered useless, because if the Knight Commander has already taken 2 wounds, then it's not gonna be able to kill my character probably. Because I have 4 wounds with a 5+ ward save, so even if he manages to inflict 4 hits, I still have a 5+ ward save, and then I strike back with strength 7. Probably doing at least 1 wound. Yeah, so yeah, I'm quite comfortable in what is happening. So my opponent decided to walk away a little bit with the Riders. Yeah, and at this point the battle is pretty much over. He manages to inflict 1 or 2 wounds on my general. I managed to strike his Knight Commander down. And in the last turn that we have to play, I charge his State Militia and I kill them to the man, and I also charge his Riders and I kill those 2, I believe. So without any victory point losses, the Warriors of the Dark Gods take the field. Yeah, that was quite a short game. Yeah, as I already mentioned, the Empire list, I think I know quite well what it does, how it works, what to do against it. All in all, it was a pretty nice game, hopefully for the both of us, but I believe my opponent also enjoyed the game. So see you for the next round.